Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. Trevor Sikkema, that is Dalton Wasserman, here with you guys on a Thursday. And Dalton, allow me to have my best impersonation of the gif of Creed from The Office, going up to Jim, putting his hands on his shoulders and saying, 1 week. 1 week here from the 2025 NFL Draft. We are very excited for it. And to celebrate, we're going to preview some ideal draft hauls for all 32 teams in the NFL. Now, we're not just talking first round. We're not just even talking second round. We're talking an ideal draft haul for them on day 1, day 2, and day 3. So we're going to talk about a lot of strategies, get a little bit more deeper than just a first round mock draft, which we've been doing over the last couple of weeks. Dalton, how you doing, my friend?
Good. I had fun with this one, honestly. We've been talking about the first round for months on end, and we're always mock drafting the first 32 picks. But I think I had the most fun with this, picking out those day 2 and day 3 guys, because that's a lot more about matching it up with teams and finding those little details about who certain coaches and certain front offices would like. So I had a lot of fun with this one, digging through, especially those guys when you get through like 80 to about 150. I think there's still some darn good players in this draft, and it's going to be fun to match them up here.
Yeah, and obviously it was cool to sort of go through this exercise and be like, okay, well, this team, they don't have a second-round pick. For example, the Steelers. So, okay, when you do an ideal day 2 haul, you got to think about guys that are going to be there in the third round. Like, same thing with the day 3 stuff. Oh, do they have a fourth-round pick? How many do they have? Do they not pick until maybe the 5th or 6th round? Things like that. So we really got to get the feel of a draft haul or a draft strategy for all 32 teams, which we are going to run through today. Before we get to all of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by Ultra GM, a revolutionary new take on fantasy football that truly brings to life the fantasy of being the general manager for your favorite team. Look, I've been where you guys are. Sometimes you'll watch a pick come across the board and you'll be like, I could have told you that wasn't going to be a good pick. And then a couple of years from now, it wasn't. Well, now you can actually put that to the test with Ultra GM. Now they give you the chance to prove it. Choose your team, acquire that team's full roster, build and shape it through free agency, the draft, trades, and even all the way to the practice squad. You can even manage the real salary cap, real player contracts using Ultra GM's tools to make it super easy. In Ultra GM, all the players are scored, including the offensive linemen and special teamers as well. Those scores reflect the true value of each position and, of course, the action that happens on the field. You can compete against your family, friends, strangers, and even your team's real general manager to see who the real Ultra GM is. No fantasy football platform or GM simulator has ever provided this degree of realism and engagement that Ultra GM offers. If you think you can do a better job than your own GM out there, Ultra GM gives you the chance to prove it. Visit ultragm.com and sign up today. So the way that we broke this up is that Dalton and I went AFC and NFC. So what we'll do here on this show, just to make sure that it's a back and forth sort of conversation here, is we'll start with sort of the AFC North and the NFC North, and we'll just go team to team, and we'll just kind of alternate. So it won't be broken up exactly into divisions, but we'll go back and forth here, make sure that we give you guys all 32 teams here on this show. Dalton, let's start with the AFC North. You are here with these 4 teams, the Bengals, the Browns, the Steelers, and the Ravens. Where do you want to start with this one? And then I'll follow up.
I'll start here in the home base with the Cincinnati Bengals. And obviously,
PFF Bengal bias already starting out right at the top of the show. Unbelievable.
You got to lead off with it. It's home,
unbelievable.
It's home field advantage. We're a week to the draft. Everybody here is excited for it, I think. Certainly the guys behind the glass don't mind me leading off with this. So, we'll start with the Bengals and see if we can't fix this defense a little bit up front here. Day one, the guy I have written down, I think there's plenty of options, right? And it's going to be a matter of what falls to the board for them at 17. But I have Walter Nolan as my day 1 guy. I think, you talk about a high ceiling guy, a guy that you've talked about as having flashes of Jalen Carter to his game, and just the pedigree that he has. And I know you've moved him all the way up to 8th on the big board there. He's got a boatload of talent, right? And we finally got to see the full depth of that at Ole Miss this year. Second highest run defense grade in the country, which is essential to this Bengals defense. Started improving as a pass rusher, still a way to go there. But I think you're talking about a guy that if you make this investment 2 years from now, it could really pay off. The ceiling on him is immense. There's a reason he was the number 1 high school recruit in the country coming out. And I think he'd be a great fit for the Bengals defense. Day 2, I'm looking at interior pass protection for Joe Burrow. Look, I can appreciate that he's the fastest processor within the pocket in football. He knows how to protect himself, but you can't be in the bottom 5 in interior pass protection every year. I went with Tate Ratledge, the guard from Georgia, as their day 2 guy. Really athletic, really great, proven pass protector down there at Georgia, very well taught. I think he would slot in right as one of those starting right guards, either right guard or left guard, one of those starting guard spots. And then my day 3 guy, probably more of a round 4 guy, an early guy, and somebody that's obviously connected to Al Golden, their new defensive coordinator, the linebacker Jack Kaiser. He's played more games in Notre Dame history than any other player. Really athletic. I think straight line speed is really a specialty of his. He's got a quick trigger downhill when he sees it. Little bit of an issue with change of direction and coverage. Don't know that he's going to be a starter right off rip, but at the very least, as a solid third linebacker, they lost Akeem Davis-Gaither in free agency. I don't know that Kaiser would start alongside Logan Wilson right away, but he's a good depth guy to have. He's familiar with Al Golden already, and if nothing else early on, be a really good special teams contributor. I could see them, because of the familiarity, taking Jack Kaiser in round 4.
I obviously like all 3 of those players. Kaiser is somebody that you and I were talking about in like September or October, right? When the college football season was going on and we were trying to figure out who's going to be LB1 in this draft class. It was really before Jalen Walker and Jahad Campbell, Carson Schweschinger, Demetrius Knight. Really, it was before those guys were able to stand out enough. And I remember you saying like, hey, Jack Kaiser could end up being this guy. And obviously he's not LB1 in this class, but he is, I would say, of the group that we were talking about at the time before those other guys emerged. So I think it's a good shout out there. Tate Ratledge, I just think he's a really good offensive line prospect in general. He's more of a zone blocking scheme guy, and I wonder how much of that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to want to lean in with those massive dudes at offensive tackle that they have. Maybe they switch that up a little bit, but I think that Tate Ratledge would still be a good day 2 selection for them there. I'll start with the Chicago Bears. So this is the ideal draft haul, right? And it's not necessarily perfect, but when I thought about draft strategies, I really like this one from them. If they have the chance to take Tyler Warren at number 10, I think they should do so. I love Ashton Jeanty. Ashton Jeanty is phenomenal. He'd be great for this team. But if we're building a draft strategy here, day 1, I like them going after Tyler Warren. If they can get him at number 10, I think it's a clear upgrade at tight end and just forms a really good tight end room with Cole Kmet there as well. So you have the good receivers. You've got a really deep tight end room that you feel good about to go heavy personnel whenever you want. And then in the second round, they have picks 39 and 41, so they got 2 second-round picks. But I think that it should be a running back then with one of those 2 selections. Here I have them taking Quinshon Judkins, who I like a lot in this draft, specifically behind that Chicago offensive line. Now, Omarion Hampton's not going to be there. Ashton Jeanty's not going to be there. I would be great with Cam Scadaboo as well. Bears fans yell at me every single time that I give him to the Bears at the early part of the second round. So to make him happy, I'll go with Quinshon Judkins. But it really could be any of Judkins, Scadaboo, Travion Henderson, one of those running backs that I think could then be a leader for them in the backfield. So I'm going to running back there at the top of the second round. And then for the day 3 selection, they have a 3rd round pick. They don't have a 4th round pick. So it goes all the way to a 5th round. And then they have 2 7th rounders. Don't have a 6th round pick. Dalton, I went with Cam Horsley, the defensive tackle from Boston College, somebody that I think plays with a lot of effort. Doesn't have the best length to him, but neither does Grady Jarrett, who they now have on the roster. And I think he would be a great guy to learn from Grady Jarrett, with Grady Jarrett now in the building. They have some bigger players. Gervin Dexter is there. Zach Pickens is there, right? They have some guys who are a little bit bigger, can garner that nose tackle spot, but a quicker type of 3 technique defensive tackle. I think Horsley could be a guy that they would like on day 3. So that is my day 3 haul there or 3-day haul, I guess I should say, for the Chicago Bears. Who's next for you from the AFC North?
Let's go with the Cleveland Browns, and I'll start with the obvious at the top. A couple of these that I have here at the very top are going to be obvious picks because we believe, or at least we're pretty sure that they're going to happen. Let's start with Travis Hunter. Take the best athlete in the draft, receiver, corner. He could help you at both, however you want the plan to be, with percentages of playing time on each side of the ball, whatever. You want to call him a generational athlete, right? And he's the best athlete in this draft. And look, we might talk about quarterbacks later on here, maybe at the top of the second round, or maybe even next year. But either way, I think this is what you're talking about, even at the very top with best player available. Take Travis Hunter. If Andrew Berry believes he's a receiver, then fine. He could be your number 1 receiver and maybe moonlight at corner. If it's the other way around, if it's both, if he's really freaky enough to play 120 snaps a game, so be it. But that's the way to go in round 1, I think. Day 2 is interesting because I thought about getting into the quarterback questions here, but I think that's too borderline when you're talking about, are they really going to do it, right? Are they going to take Tyler Shuck, Jackson Dart? So I went a little bit later. I want to help out this offensive line, at least for the future, because you've got 4 of the 5 guys projected to start heading into the last year of their contract. So I went Wyatt Milam from West Virginia. And look, I don't know in the league if there's teams that believe he can play tackle, if the lack of length limits him to guard, but I think this is a player who's athletic enough to play in Kevin Stefanski's system, and maybe next year you give him a year to sit behind some of the veterans on this offensive line, and then maybe you head into 2026 with him as a starting guard. And then my day 3 guy, there was a lot of talk earlier in the offseason about could they draft Abdul Carter, find more pass rush help around Myles Garrett, right? When Antoine Powell-Ryland from Virginia Tech, who's just kind of be a designated pass rusher for the most part, speedy three-point stance defensive end from Virginia Tech, 24 sacks over the last 2 years. And, I like the work that guys like Isaiah McGuire have done in run defense on early downs for him, but I think Powell-Ryland's someone who could rotate in obvious passing situations and give him a little more juice in the pass rush.
I think that's a really good 3, especially Milam. I really like the fact that he has played offensive tackle for them. I think he's better at guard in the NFL, but we talked about this with the Cleveland Browns. Like, I think just innately we go like, oh yeah, the Browns offensive line, it's one of the best in the NFL because it has been on paper when those guys are fully healthy. But a year from now, 2 years from now, there might not be a single guy who is right on the roster starting right now that might still be in Cleveland. It might be a totally new look 5. And so I think getting ahead of that, drafting a guy like Wyatt Milam, especially somebody who can play both positions, that would be good for them. I'll go with the Detroit Lions next. An ideal player for them. I know I've talked about, okay, it depends on what kind of strategy they want to employ with their deploy with their defensive line, I should say. They could get a bigger, more heavy-handed, run-stopping defensive end to just allow Aiden Hutchinson to have more one-on-one opportunities, or they could get somebody who's a little bit more proficient as a pass rusher and sort of have a double-edged sword or a two-headed monster, really, on either side of the line of scrimmage as a pass rusher. I'll go with Donovan Ezeraku. I think that if he gets to number 28 with the Detroit Lions, that's the ideal landing spot for him, getting to play opposite Aiden Hutchinson. He's just somebody who's been fantastic over the last 3 years when it comes to production. And I know his junior year, he was a little disappointed in what he was able to do, but it felt like Donovan Ezeraku's most disappointing season production-wise was like Michael Williams and Shamar Stewart's like best season, which is kind of funny when you say it like that. So I'll get him in the first round for the Lions to address defensive line and pass rusher. I'll go with Kyle Williams, the wide receiver from Washington State, somewhere on day 2. I like Jameson Williams. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I even like Tim Patrick. But getting some extra juice in there with Kyle Williams, I think could be really big for this team. And it sets up a really good young trio of wide receivers in St. Brown, J-Mo, and then Kyle Williams. So I'll take him on day 2. And then day 3, let's get in the trenches. I know they don't have quite the immediate need at offensive line, because they had Christian Mahogany, who now steps in for Kevin Zeitler, who left in free agency. But Graham Glasnow's, not getting any younger. Frank Ragnow, he's been really beat up throughout his career. I know he's still playing, and he's not mulling retirement right now, but how about a guy like Miles Frazier, somebody who played offensive tackle in his career in college, kicked inside to play guard for LSU, somebody who he's got some really nice pass protection work. I think he just needs to get a little bit stronger, and I think that he would be afforded the time to really be able to get stronger with Detroit's offensive line and the timeline that they have there. So could become a starter for them eventually, doesn't have to start right away. So I would go Donovan Ezeraku on day 1, Kyle Williams on day 2, and then Miles Frazier on day 3 for them. So that's my 3-player haul there for the Detroit Lions. Who's next for you?
Baltimore Ravens. Let's go with the first place team in the AFC North here. And it's kind of borderline with this first player because we think he's more of a round 2 guy. He's still number 30 on the consensus board. He might get into the first round range, the back end here. And I think to the Ravens at 27 would be the highest I could see Tyler Booker going. And I think it makes a lot of sense. If you insert him as that starting left guard, Patrick McCarry left in free agency, put him between Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Linderbaum. He's got a high floor to me as a pass protector. Obviously not the most athletic run blocker. We saw the lack of athleticism in the testing at the combine particularly, but I still think Booker for this team makes some sense. If they were to do it at 27, I wouldn't hate it so much. I don't think he would go any higher than that. I don't expect him to go any higher than that. I should say maybe Houston thinks about him at 25, but I'm not sure that I would do that. So Tyler Booker to the Ravens. I had a hard time kind of picking out with a Ravens first round pick there, and a lot of our mock draft simulator users are going with edge player. That's where I'm actually going to go next with my day 2 pick. Need a little more pass rush juice off the edge, especially from a stand-up 2-point perspective. I think Josiah Stewart from Michigan would make a great Baltimore Raven. You talk about the underneath pass rush metrics, especially this past year that he put up at Michigan. He was fantastic. I know he's undersized. Maybe he's not necessarily an every down player, but they've got a deep rotation of edge rushers. You've got, Odafe Owe and Kyle Van Noy, David Ojabo. I think you put Stewart in that mix, and I think he fits right in on late downs. And then I'll go, there's been some talk. Do they need an outside corner to keep Marlon Humphrey in the slot? Do they need a slot corner to move Humphrey back outside? I'll take Jordan Hancock from Ohio State. I think that's somebody who could play in the slot for them early, move Marlon Humphrey back outside. And he's even got a little bit of experience at safety if they wanted him to play kind of that in-between or Darius Washington role if something were to happen to Washington or if the performance dropped off there. I think Jordan Hancock is somebody the Ravens would like on day 3, probably something like a 5th or a 6th round pick there.
I agree. I think that he is their type of defensive back. He can play safety for you, but he did a lot of really great work in the slot. He's just a flexible player for them. And look, they got TJ Tampa to sort of be their backup on the outside, so they've got him in reserve on the outside as an outside corner, but having somebody who gives you that safety slot flexibility, I do like that selection there on day 3 for them. Green Bay Packers. So my ideal haul for the Green Bay Packers here, in the first round, I'm not going edge rusher. I'm actually going with Emeka Egbuka because as I've talked with some Packers people over the last couple of weeks, really, the more it makes me feel as though they've got a lot of names on the roster right now. A year from now, Jaden Reed might be the only guy there, right? I mean, Christian Watson might not be there anymore. Romeo Doubs might not be there anymore. Dontavian Wicks is under contract, but if he's going to continue to be as inconsistent as he has been with catching the football, they could move on from him very easily. So, yeah, it's a deep wide receiver room right now. I know they got Malik Heath as well, but it just could look very different a year from now. I also think that even with the guys who are there, Emeka Egbuka is your wide receiver 1. He's immediately the wide receiver 1 on this team. You get to bump Jaden Reed down to a wide receiver 2 spot, which I think is more ideal. You don't want to have to lean on him with such a heavy volume the way that they did last season, even though he was really good in spurts. I would rather him be a wide receiver 2 type for you. So I'm drafting Emeka Egbuka in the first round also because they have a lot of bodies on the defensive line. They just got to play better. Now that brings me to day 2 for them. If they have a chance to draft Benjamin Morrison, the corner from Notre Dame, simply because, Benjamin Morrison, he was hurt a lot this season. He had the hip injury. Like, that's really the biggest reason why I don't think he's a first-round type of a corner. If they can draft him, it'd have to be with their second-round pick. But, man, what a selection that would be. I think he could start immediately for them on the outside. The people at Notre Dame just sort of praised who he was as a worker and how he was already a professional when he was even an underclassman. I think he's really smooth in man coverage. He's a little bit light. He's a little bit slender. But, man, I think you could put some extra weight on him, and his intangibles coming from that press alignment is really good. And I think he's a natural for the type of defense that Jeff Hafley runs. So if they can get Benjamin Morrison in the second round on day 2, I think that's very ideal. And then getting to day 3, I'm going to go with Tyler Beatty from BYU. He's a defensive end, but he's around 270, 275 pounds. So he's somebody that I think fits what the Green Bay Packers are looking for with some inside-out versatility. I know it's a little bit more structured with Hafley's defense now. It's the structured even front. I think he could play defensive end for you. I think he could also put on a little bit of weight, and if you want him as more of an interior player or somebody who's just versatile to be able to play both spots. He's got a really high motor to him. I think he's got some good length. He's got some good height. And he shows a good combination of size and speed. Now, it's not elite, right? There's a reason why I'm not talking about him as a day 2 or a day 1 player, but as an extra body on that defensive line, a new body who could maybe raise the floor of what that defensive line does, I'll go with Beatty there for the Packers. So Egbuka, Benjamin Morrison, Tyler Beatty, that's my 3. Who's the last team? I guess it's the Pittsburgh Steelers now that you're talking about here for the AFC North. Yeah,
the Pittsburgh Steelers. And look, the quarterback question is so tough. I actually just excluded it from this because, we don't know if it's going to be Aaron Rodgers or Shedeur Sanders or Jalen Miller or whoever it may be, and we'll find that out on draft day. It's hard. They're the hardest team, I think, maybe in the entire first round to speculate right now. So I went the other direction. You guys got me on this one. I'll go with Kenneth Grant in the first round. For as much as I would highly consider an Emeka Egbuka or a Luther Burden, they do need depth behind Cam Hayward, behind Keanu Benton, right? So I understand the future play of taking Kenneth Grant in the first round if they have the luxury to do it. I think in round 3, I don't love this running back situation. It's Jalen Warren, and I believe, is it Kenneth Gainwell went there behind him? They're kind of smaller, quicker backs, right? I need that power that I had with Najee Harris, right? Or, and there's a back in this round 3. Maybe he gets to round 4, but I think he's worthy of a third-round pick. There's a back that I would compare, actually Max Chadwick, I should say, I'm stealing the comparison here, to James Conner, and that's Damian Martinez. I think he's somebody who could give you that big, cold-weather back that you don't want to tackle, that good complement to the cut and slasher in Jalen Warren and the receiver in Kenneth Gainwell. I think he would round out the room well. And then I'll take Noah Williams, the corner from Cal. I think you're talking about, okay, the Steelers, they have Joey Porter Jr., they signed Darius Slay to a one-year deal, still need more help in corner. And the big thing with that, the Steelers play a good amount of press man coverage, and that's where Williams really, really excels. Plus, he led the nation in interceptions this past season. So Williams gets some talent in there, maybe some round 4 or 5 talent there at corner. And Martinez, to me, is somebody I think who would really, really fit in. If they got him in the third round, you'd have a much better committee, a more well-rounded committee there at running back.
All three very good Steelers fits, in my opinion. Obviously, you're not addressing quarterback, but you said that at the very top. So if you're not considering quarterback, I think Kenneth Grant's an excellent Cam Hayward sort of predecessor. Somebody who could learn under him and really take the torch from him. Damian Martinez, like you said, is a great compliment. And then Noah Williams is what they like from the cornerback position. Last team in the NFC North that I'm going over is the Minnesota Vikings. And this one's tough, right? They pick at 24 and then they don't pick again until 97. So my day 2 selection had to be a little bit later for them. In round 1, Gray Zabel's the guy here, in my opinion. It really rounds out the changes that they made to the interior offensive line. They brought in Will Fries as well, Ryan Kelly. You've got O'Neal, you've got Darisaw at the tackle spots. And then if you put Gray Zabel in at that other guard spot, man, what an ideal starting 5 that you have, a remake starting 5 for Minnesota. If you simulate all the way to the back end of the third round where they have their third round selection, I'll go with Jamari Caldwell, the defensive tackle, nose tackle from Oregon, who he's got some nimble footwork for a guy who is his size. And I know that he's known for being a run stuffer, but I think it gives you a little bit of extra quickness there as well. So again, Javon Hargrave is in the building. John Allen is there. Harrison Phillips. But getting Jamar Caldwell in there with some of those guys aging and obviously not being as young as they once were, I think is really good for the future. Finally, if we get to day 3, it's, what were their selections? I think it's a 5th rounder and a 7th rounder, if I remember correctly. I'm looking this up now. It is a 5th rounder. It's Cleveland's 5th rounder, and it's a 6th rounder. It's San Francisco's 6th rounder there. But I ended up going with Zah Frazier, the cornerback from UTSA. 6'3", 185 pounds, very similar to that of a former Roadrunner in Tariq Woolen when he was coming out. And he's a project, right? I mean, he's somebody who has all the athletic ability in the world, really great length, but just doesn't anticipate quite as well as you'd want him to right now. He's reacting instead of anticipating, and he doesn't play as in control as you want a corner to be at the NFL level. But that could all be there for him, and they certainly need just some corners to bet on, and certainly giving themselves some size on the outside is something that I think would be beneficial for them. So there we go. That's the AFC and the NFC North. Before we move on, we're doing the AFC and NFC South next. Question all the parents out there. What's your child's future success look like for you? Maybe it is, them being able to start their business, doing something that they absolutely love, that they created on their own, and you were able to help them get that off the ground. Maybe it's them traveling the world, or maybe it's just them living a comfortable life somewhere in a house that they love with their family. Whatever it is, you can help them achieve that with the Kids Investment Account from Fabric by Gerber Life. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a Kids Investment Account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Kids can't invest while they're minors, but this Kids Investment Account, which you can open at any time, allows you to invest on their behalf, gives their investment so much more time to grow. Starts you just $20. Whole thing is online. There's no contribution limits to it. Tax advantages, funds are SIPC insured up to $500,000. There's no commission fees on it, just a low flat monthly maintenance fee for it. You could also use these whenever. It's not just when they're much older. When they're kids, it's sporting events, it's music classes, it's tutors, it's tuition, things like that. And then when they're older, maybe it is you helping them start that business, travel the world, buy their first house, buy their first car, whatever it is. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. It's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, MEET fabric.com/PFFNFL. The portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. You can learn more at meetfabric.com. AFC South for you. Which team in the AFC South are we going with first? We got the Colts, the Jags, the Texans, the Titans, and then I got the Bucs, the Panthers, the Saints, and the Falcons. Who are you going with first here?
I'll start with the Indianapolis Colts, and I know the hot pick in the first round has been, say, a tight end. If Tyler Warren was there, if Colston Loveland is there, he's expected more so to be there. We'll see. But I'm going to go a different direction on defense. I'm going to go with Jahad Campbell, the linebacker, and I think what you have Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed left in free agency. There's a little bit of a hole there in the starting spot. Not a lot of depth. We don't really know who's going to be next to Zaire Franklin at linebacker. You get Jahad Campbell. I think the biggest thing that fixes is their coverage over the middle of the field. The Colts had one of the worst coverage grades from a linebacker unit in the league last year, and this is, to me, the one guy at linebacker in this draft that's a true three-way threat. Run defense, coverage, and the ability to rush the passer. I think he would be the great man in the middle for Lou Anarumo in that defense that he's trying to build. They've done a great job in free agency in the secondary. They've got some young defensive linemen to work with, but I think a centerpiece like Jahad Campbell would really fill out this defense well. I'll start there with the 14th overall pick. Day two, now is when I'm looking at that tight end position, and I think there's some good depth in this class. I'm going to take Mason Taylor from LSU, and I think the big thing for me here is he's so young, and there's a lot of development to go, and he'd probably be starting for the Colts right now. It's going to be some trial by fire, but got a lot of experience as that primary target in all of the RPOs that LSU ran down there. And Shane Steichen's one of the heavier RPO coaches in the NFL. He's got good technique as a blocker, got to get a little bit stronger. But I think Mason Taylor is somebody who could develop well in this system. Would not shock me at all if he was a day two target for them. And then I'm going to take a running back. I know Jonathan Taylor's there, but the Colts running backs had the worst receiving grade in the NFL last year. To me, I would really like to see them get a pass-catching compliment. And there's no better player for that to me in this draft than Brashard Smith, a guy who might go, I think, in the fourth, maybe even sneaks into the fifth round, depending on a role that teams are trying to find for him. But I think Smith as that movable complement, that late down back, obvious passing situations, and a guy, you've heard me say it before, I compare a lot to Nyheim Hines, and Hines played most of his career with the Colts organization, somebody who can move all over the formation as a former wide receiver. I think Smith can be that passing down weapon that complements Jonathan Taylor really well in the backfield.
Yeah, I don't hate that, and I love the idea of adding Jahad Campbell into the middle of that defense, especially with them changing defensive coordinators, right? I think that Lou Anarumo now would be able to get a guy that he's drafting that he would obviously, you would make this pick ideally thinking that Lou would love this guy and that he's a great centerpiece. And I think when you think about when the Bengals defense was at its best, when they were making a run at the Super Bowl, they were pretty damn good at the second level. They had some good linebackers to lean on, so they definitely need that as well. I'll start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm going to go with Donovan Izaraku. I think he's the ideal pick for them at number 19. I mean, Jahad Campbell, who we just talked about, could also be on the board for them there at this spot, but getting somebody who knows how to get after the passer, I think that is very, very important. I've said it before when we were talking about the Lions. I don't have too many duplicates, but this one makes too much sense for both of these teams, so I had to say it for Tampa Bay. The 16.5 sacks, the 21 tackles for loss for Izaraku this past season. And most importantly, well, maybe not most importantly, but just something that you also love about him, 80 or above run defense grade in each of the last 3 seasons that he was a starter at Boston College, despite being a little bit smaller, a little bit more of that 3-4 outside linebacker type. Typically, when you get guys like that, okay, well, they're giving up some weight, they're giving up some length maybe. That's not the case with Izaraku. He's got really good length to him, and even though he's a little bit smaller, man, he uses his leverage very, very well. So an immediate starter for them, somebody who could already hit the ground running for Tampa Bay. In the second round, or day two, really, it's got to be the second round, I think, just because of how much I think this guy's stock is rising or has risen, or at least we have learned over the last month or so. Carson Schwessinger, the linebacker from UCLA. They absolutely need to invest in linebacker at some point in this upcoming draft. And Schwessinger, where he's not perfect, he has plenty of plays where, okay, he's earning a negative PFF grade because maybe he's over pursuing or he's reading reading it wrong. It's not like he's been starting for 8 years. This dude has been a 1-year starter for them, somebody that was really able to step in this year, but you love that click and close ability, and some of the instinct plays are pretty special. So I think just the up and down nature of him might be something that pushes him to the second round, but I have heard some first round buzz for him. So if Tampa could get him in the second round, they'd absolutely love it. And then somewhere on day 3, let's go with the cornerback. I think the Bucs definitely need to address corner. Dorian Strong is somebody that I've talked about, the corner from Virginia Tech, who can play in press coverage, but I like him the best as an off-coverage cover 3 defender, which is something that Todd Bowles loves to run. It's a staple of Todd Bowles' defense. Be aggressive up front, running cover 3 and zone coverage on the back end. So he's sort of a natural a fit for them there in the type of scheme that he likes to play. And so scheme fits, I think, for all three of these guys for Tampa Bay. So Ezra Rocco in the first, they can get Schwestinger on day 2. That'd be great. And then Dorian Strong somewhere at the beginning parts of day 3. Who's next for you here in this group?
Let's go with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the first two guys here were a couple of the easier ones for me in this entire process. First of all, if Travis Hunter is not on the board and Mason Graham is at 5th overall, take Mason Graham in Jacksonville. I see no reason not to do this. I think he's one of the 4 best football players in this draft. I think it's the one hole on their defensive line that really needs to be filled. And if he gets into that defensive line, and now you're talking about Walker, Hines Allen, Eric Armstead, and Mason Graham, I think you're really building on something here, especially when you consider that Graham was the highest graded run defender at defensive tackle in college football last year. I think that's a home run. I know it's the pick now being projected most often, and it should be. That should be the pick. I think it's a home run at number 5. I look at that. I believe they're picking, 35 or 36 early in the second round, and a guy I just keep gravitating towards for this team that, at safety, they're the lowest graded safety unit in football last year. I look at the players that they have, and I see Darnell Savage, I see Eric Murray, Antonio Johnson, and I just don't see that backbone, that center fielder. I think Xavier Watts is the perfect guy for them. If he gets to them in that mid-30s range, as long as he doesn't go late in the first round. If he gets to them, I think Xavier Watts should absolutely be their second-round pick. I think he'd be perfect to lock in at free safety behind Tyson Campbell and Jordan Lewis, Jerryon Jones, all those guys have at corner, all those other box-ish kind of safeties that they have. I think Watts would be perfect. Then I think this team could add some depth at receiver. I know they have De'Ami Brown now, Gabe Davis coming off injury, although he wasn't really mentioned lately by, I think it was Liam Cohen or James Gladstone was talking about the receiver room, and really wasn't any mention of Gabe Davis at all. So, Parker Washington in the slot. I think somebody who might work for him on day 3 is Andrew Armstrong from Arkansas. I think this is an underrated, big-bodied possession receiver who can work well in that intermediate range. And the Jaguars had one of the lowest intermediate receiving grades in the league. I think this is somebody on day 3 that they could target to add more size to that room and allow those other players like Brown and obviously Brian Thomas Jr. to get vertical. I think he could do a lot of work just moving the chains for them and would be a nice pickup to add a different dimension to that receiving room.
I love that one. Andrew Armstrong with the Jags. I have not thought about that one before, but it's sort of like, okay, we like Ted McMillan a lot. So it's like, all right, well, you can be tempted by Ted McMillan at 5, right? Because Brian Thomas Jr., Tetro McMillan, I think that's a really nice wide receiver duo there that you could have. But if you're not drafting him there, I agree with you. I like them going after safety. It's pick number 36. You were right there with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Getting Xavier Watts, I think that's a really good fit for them. But then on day 3, Armstrong has the profile of somebody who I think he's going to be drafted on day 3 just because it is kind of a deeper wide receiver class. It's not the best one in the world, but I think that somewhere, 3rd round, 4th round, just him being a little bit more of an unknown is a good bet to make. Like, he's sort of that Tetro and McMillan archetype. He's just not as proven. So there is a chance that he could have similar benefits to where if Tet was on the team, you could see those benefits with Brian Thomas Jr. and just the overall passing attack. So I do like that call out there. I have not thought of that one before, and I do like it. I know Max Chadwick, your boy, likes it as well because Max is a big fan of Andrew Armstrong. I'm going to go to the Atlanta Falcons. When I look at the Falcons, I think they need to be much better at pass rusher. But I ended up waiting on this for an ideal draft haul simply because, the team has talked about this. Okay, we've got bodies on the defensive line. We want to see who is really able to sort things out and become a major contributor for us, specifically those second-year guys. Ruka Rororo, Brandon Dorless, Braylon Trice, guys like that. So I ended up going with Will Johnson in the first round. I think that Will Johnson is the ideal pick for them in the first round to play opposite A.J. Terrell. It gives you 2 corners that you feel pretty confident about on the outside. I ended up going with Kevin Winston Jr. for them at the safety spot as my ideal day 2 haul because now I think that you have a really good safety duo between Kevin Winston Jr. and Jesse Bates. You allow Jesse Bates to be a little bit more of a free safety and to roam around a little bit on the back end. He could even play in those robber roles. And Kevin Winston Jr., you allow him to just be a downhill safety, something that he was excellent at over the last 2 years when he was on the field. Somebody who really did not miss a lot of tackles at all. Somebody who's very reliable but had some good athleticism too. So the injury this year Him just being a little bit inconsistent to start the year and being a younger player, needing a little bit of development anyways, probably why he's not going to be a first-round pick, but somebody I think the Falcons would absolutely love to pair with Bates there on the back end. So I'll go Will Johnson on day 1, Kevin Winston Jr. on day 2, and then day 3, okay, let's get a pass rusher in there. Somebody with some high potential. Let's go Quay Robinson, the 3-4 outside linebacker who I think is a really good scheme fit coming from Alabama. This is somebody who was a 4-star recruit. When he got to Alabama, he just had to wait his time behind Will Anderson, behind Dallas Turner, behind Chris Braswell. This past year was his first year to really be a full-time starter, but we only got, I believe it was 7 or 8 games out of him just because he had an elbow and a forearm injury that held him out the rest of the year. So you saw a very high pass rush win percentage from him. I believe it's right around 22.1%. Really good pass rush grades. He's sort of streamlined as just this pass rush specialist right now, but could potentially be more with his size and length. I think you could put some more weight on him as well to get a little bit stronger. But that 3-4 outside linebacker type of a player who can give you good pass rush reps in spurts, that would be ideal for them on day 3. So Will Johnson, Kevin Winston Jr., and Quay Robinson there for the Falcons. Who's next for you?
First of all, real quick, I just absolutely love that idea of Jesse Bates and Kevin Winston. That's just fantastic. I think whoever, we're going to talk about this on probably day 2 of the draft, whoever gets Winston, if it's in round 2 or early in round 3, you're getting a steal. And if Atlanta wants to do that in the 40s to pair him with Bates, I could not think of a better fit than that. That's fantastic stuff. I'll go with the Houston Texans next. And look, this first one, probably going to get me in some hot water, but I've been saying they should not, I know the offensive line's a mess. They should not force feed an offensive lineman if there's not one there at 25 that they absolutely love. They have options. They have places that they need to improve. That includes wide receiver. That includes defensive tackle. I'm going to get to that with these first 2 players. First, I think Emeka Egbuka, put him back with C.J. Stroud. He can play the role that Stephon Diggs was supposed to play for the most part last year. Really good blocker in the run game that could help you. Really good separator underneath. I think a really good complement, that Z complement to the X that Nico Collins is. I think this would just make life for C.J. Stroud so much easier because that's what Emeka Egbuka does. He makes quarterbacks' lives easier. He makes coaches' lives easier. I think this is a rock-solid starter, well worthy of that 25th pick or even higher. I think, look, we can worry about if they want interior offensive linemen, day 2 is a sweet spot for that. They have some extra day 2 picks. I think that's somewhere they could go there. I didn't highlight any here just because I wanted to get this other player here. Look, the Texans also need a run-stopping defensive tackle, especially for the 4-man front that they play, and they always stay in it. They don't go extra defensive linemen. I need somebody on the inside who can just clog the inside gaps. I love the idea of C.J. West from Indiana going to the Houston Texans. I think I think they're picking, is it 79 and 89, somewhere in that range. If they can get C.J. West in that range to plug up the inside, where that's really where they struggle on defense. Their pass defense is going to be elite this year. The edge rushers, obviously, the secondary is as deep as it gets. Stingley and Lassiter are outside, but I need some run stoppers. I need help on early downs, and I think C.J. West is absolutely perfect for their defense. Another player that makes everybody's life around him easier. And then my day 3 guy, very quietly, look, I know they have Dalton Schultz as the starter. They drafted Cade Stover last year, but this tight end unit is one of the worst blocking units in the league. I think Jackson Hawes from Georgia Tech would just add that nasty element, and they were actually the worst pass blocking unit among tight ends in the league last year. I think in both dimensions, the run and the pass game as an extra guy in that room doesn't have a ton of receiving ability, but you have Dalton Schultz for that. I think Jackson Hawes would be a really nice pickup for him on day 3.
You are right. It's 79 and 89 that they have there in the 3rd round. And if they can get C.J. West, I think that's absolutely a D'Amico Ryans type of a player. I like the Jackson Hawes edition as well. Get a little bit heavier, get a little bit stronger in your potential, 6th offensive lineman spot, as they say, for that tight end position. I love Emeka Egbuka as well. I talked about him for the Packers there. We'll stick with the wide receiver training for the Carolina Panthers. I get it. Gabe Canales said, hey, we're drafting defense. We got to fix the defense. I think this offense looks completely different if Tetairoa McMillan is in it. The ideal draft spot, or the ideal player for them in the 1st round, in my opinion, is Tetairoa McMillan. And I'm a big Tet guy, so I love Tetairoa McMillan, so obviously I'm going to lean towards him being the pick here. But to me, this defensive draft is much deeper than I think even the wide receiver position, like even a lot of the other offensive positions. And if you're Carolina, hammer that wide receiver spot to get a bona fide wide receiver 1 there. You can have Xavier Legette play as a wide receiver 2. You've got Adam Thielen to be able to play in the slot in a lot of different positions, honestly, just because of how good he is and how smart he is. Tetro McMillan changes this offense if he is in it. So I'm going to draft him in the first round here for the Panthers for their ideal draft haul. Then I'm going to go with a guy who I really like as an edge pass rusher, Braden Swinson from LSU. There's some love for him going in the back end of the first round, but I think there's a very good chance that he could be available for Carolina's pick in the second round, which is, number 57. So it's not as early as their normal pick, but they've got that pick there in the second round because they have the Rams pick at number 57. They might have to trade up for it, which they've got 2 fourth-round picks. They've got 3 fifth-round picks. I think you could package some of that, and you might be able to trade up a little bit for whatever pass rusher you want. I'm going to go with Braden Swinson here. He's the ideal target for them in round 2 because pass rush win percentage was really good this past year. Really like the hand usage. I think he fits very perfectly in his Giro Evero's odd front scheme. He can rush from a stand-up alignment, from a 2-point stance, if you will. I think that that's just going to be a very natural transition for him, and he could be one of the better pass rushers there on the team immediately. Well, they've got some depth along the defensive line and with the outside linebackers, but they don't have that pass rush player that they can go to on third downs. I think Swinson could be that guy. Last guy for Carolina, I'm going to go with Craig Woodson. Let's go to the secondary here. They need help in the secondary. They brought in Trayvon Merrick, who I think they want as more of a downhill safety. I think they want him more as that strong safety type, box safety, slot safety, robber roll type of a player over the middle of the field. Craig Woodson, we saw his athleticism at the combine. He measured in like a really good athlete. And when we see him on tape at Cal, they put him in those single high situations quite often. So they have that flexibility to be able to run single high in cover 3 or cover 1 situations with a guy like Woodson, get a little bit more aggressive in how they move Merrick around the field. And so I think that he would be a really good day 3 target for them. So Tetsuo McMillan in the first round, Braden Swinson in the second, and then somewhere on day 3, getting Craig Woodson, the safety from Cal. That's my day 3 haul for the Carolina Panthers there. Last team in your division. What do we got?
Also, just real quick, I'm with you. I have convinced myself that the right Panthers draft strategy is to take Tetero McMillan and then use the rest of their other 8 picks all on defense.
I agree.
I'm so in on that. They don't need a weapon. They need the weapon, and McMillan can be the weapon. Is it more likely they're probably taking a defensive guy first? Sure, I get it. But I think that's what I would do as well. Go with Ted and then take 8 defensive players and figure it out later. Tennessee Titans here. I think structurally kind of an easier one. Obviously, Cam Ward, he's going first, right in ink. I don't know how much more we have to say about it. That's going to be the first part of the ideal draft haul is drafting Cam Ward. He's pretty much said as much on Fortnite the other night when he was streaming that, right? Or whatever it was he was playing. I get to the top of the second round at 33, and I feel like I have 2 options here, and I was going to go with them one way or the other, but it's either an edge player to help that unit, help the pass rush, because they're really good inside with Simmons and Sweat, but not a whole lot off the edge right now, especially after losing Harold Landry, or a receiver. If it was somebody like a Luther Burden who fell to 33, that would be a thought also. I wound up going with Nick Scorton here. Get that stand-up edge rusher. I think you get him back to that 2023 blueprint that he played with at Purdue. It's just that stand-up, aggressive, pin your ears back edge rusher. He didn't have the pass rush production at Texas A&M, but it was really a matter of alignment and just playing the run, playing things more conservative, playing a little more over the tackle or just outside of it, even a little bit of a tighter 7 technique, right? So I think Scorton would really be a help for this pass rush. And then I think about, okay, I want a Luther Burden-ish type of player, somebody who can work after the catch. Maybe down the line it's Miami Xavier Restrepo, just get him back with Cam Ward because they already have the chemistry. But a guy that I'm curious on day 3, I don't know if we've talked about him much, is Jalen Lane from Virginia Tech. He's got blazing speed. He's got some of the best after-the-catch numbers per reception that we have in this draft. I believe a 99th percentile separation rate this season at Virginia Tech. Their quarterbacks just struggled to get him the football. They didn't have a whole lot of accuracy there in Virginia Tech's quarterback room. They were run-heavy offense first, and then they struggled, especially on those underneath throws, to just get him the football. But I think Jalen Lane is somebody in the slot who could really help you, give you that explosiveness, and even start out as a day 3 pick as a punt returner. He's really dangerous. You're talking about a guy with 4.3 speed who's a really good athlete and a good underneath separator. I think he's going to help a team, and Tennessee could be that team. They need a slot receiver, somebody who can work after the catch with the ball in his hands.
Yeah, a lot of roster versatility for him as well. You mentioned the special teams usage. I just wrote an article talking about X factors or gadget players that we have in the 2025 NFL draft, and he is somebody that I brought up because Virginia Tech really just wanted to get the ball in his hands any way they could to try to maximize that athleticism and that speed. So punt returner, kick returner, you can use him on jet sweeps. You can use him quickly with the screen game. You can use Jalen Lane in a lot of ways. So I like that for the Titans as well. You're getting a little bit faster there. New Orleans Saints. Okay, the Saints are the last team that we have in the NFC South right now. I didn't go with Shedeur Sanders in round one. You know how I feel about Shedeur. I'd be comfortable drafting him somewhere on day 2, but in terms of a day 1 haul, I don't think that's ideal. The ideal pick, I would love to get Walter Nolan on this team. You'll get this defensive line, and it's a lot of aging players. It's a lot of, I get rotational role players on the defensive line. They don't have a dude. They don't have a dude at an edge rusher spot, and they don't have a dude on the interior. So let's take Walter Nolan and invest in him there. You talked about, hey, that athletic ability, that just speed to power ability that made him a number 1 overall recruit in the country. We are starting to see that more and more in his game as a true junior. There's a lot left in the tank for him to get even better and hit that ceiling as an athlete. So I want that difference maker on the defensive line. We're going to go with him as that ideal round 1 target. Day 2, it sort of depends on how much they want to continue to run man coverage. But when I look at having Alontae Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry as the corners that are already on your team, if you draft Azareye'h Thomas, the corner from Florida State, now all of a sudden you have 3 corners who love to play man coverage. Like, that is their style, press man coverage, and it allows you to be really aggressive in what you do with the secondary. So I'll go with Thomas here. Like I said, it sort of depends on how much they want to continue to lean on being a heavy man coverage team. But if they want to do that, you can really complete the trio, if you will, by bringing in Thomas. So I think that he could be an ideal player for them in their secondary to give them a really good trio of corners there inside and out. And then on day 3, let's go with Logan Brown. Logan Brown, the offensive tackle from Kansas, somebody who's built really well. Weight is distributed really well. He's got some good strength to him. I think he's a pretty dang good athlete. Is it all there for him when it comes to the anticipation and the footwork and all that? No, but he's a good Saints offensive lineman to say, okay, this guy might be a tackle for us. He might be a guard. I think he's got the size, the strength, and he's got some good fluidity. He's got some quick footwork to him to be able to play inside and out. He's just a little inconsistent. He needs to anticipate, like I said, a little bit better. Needs to continue to study what pass rushers are going to do against him so they can anticipate those moves, so that his footwork is exactly where it needs to be. He's not recovering, but he is a pretty good athlete. So, making sure that he can showcase his power a lot more, because when he gets guys in between the shoulder pads, he can normally lock them up and move them a little bit. But it's just needing to see things before they happen or anticipate what passers are going to do. I think that holds the key for him to potentially be a starter for you one day at tackle or guard. And I think the Saints definitely need that flexibility along their offensive line. We're going to do the AFC and the NFC, so AFC and NFC East next. Before we get to that, got to talk about the staple of every single outfit, and that's a hat. And our friends over at Melon, they're making some of the most durable, comfortable hats that you are going to find. I've got 2 of these. They're fantastic. I love wearing these hats. They've also got all sorts of different, collections for different situations. Obviously, they have the ones that are sort of everyday use. You can throw it on whenever, whether you're going to see friends, whether it's a date night, whether you're just walking out of the house, going to walk the dog, whatever. They've got those classic hats, but then they've got, the thermal collection, which is one that you can wear in the winter. It helps you stay a little bit warmer. They've got the hydro collection where, hey, summertime's coming up. Are you going to be spending time in the water, on the lake, on the beach? Maybe you just live in a climate where it's going to rain a lot. Like, you could have these hats and not worry about them getting wet at all. These are not your average hats. They make the most premium, durable headwear in the world, built for all sorts of situations. And like I said, they last 5 times longer than any hat that is out there. They're also super comfortable. You guys know how it is. When you find a good hat, it either has good structure, and you know that it's going to sort of keep its structure for a while, but it's not really comfortable, or it's super comfortable, but it's flimsy. Like, it's not going to keep its shape. This is the best of both worlds. The Melon hats are really the best of both worlds, and so much more. Go check out all the different collections that they have to find the exact hat that you want. If you were looking for the world's most durable hat, look no further. Go to melon.com, MELIN.com, and put these hats to the test for yourself. AFC and NFC East is what we're doing here. Bills, Dolphins, Jets, Patriots, the 4 teams that you have here, Dalton. Where are we starting with this division?
Start in first place with the Buffalo Bills with that 30th pick. And look, I do actually think the Bills should think about, if there's a player they like that starts falling in the first round, they should think about trading up. But let's assume they stay at that 30th pick. And I think one of their first 3 picks, their first-round pick and their 2 second-round picks, one of them is going to be a corner. And I kept trying to decide the order of how this was going to go. And at the end of the day, when I was looking at that late first-rounder, I just kept settling on Trey Amos from Ole Miss. And look, I have him CB5. He's behind Ben Morrison. He's probably going to get drafted ahead of Benjamin Morrison because of the injury with Morrison, the hip concerns, and all of that. I went Trey Amos right there with that 30th pick. I think just a versatile, well-sized, solid man or zone corner. They can do whatever they want with him. They just need something at corner across from Christian Benford on the outside. Right now, Dane Jackson's slated to start for them, and I don't think you can rely on that too much. This is obviously, if you couldn't tell, it's going to be a heavy defensive theme here with the Bills. But Trey Amos with the first-round pick. If this player gets to them with one of their 2 second-round picks, I think it's 56 and 62, I would absolutely love it. Tyleik Williams, I think, would be a great fit from Ohio State in their defense. Does he give you a ton in the pass rush? Not necessarily, but he's one of the elite run defenders in this class. I think it's going to be a theme where we're talking about 1,000,007 run-defending defensive tackles. And something I was looking at behind the scenes, what I can do is isolate what gaps that certain players are defending, right? And you think about the Bills being their defensive tackles, one of the worst teams at defending the B gaps, right? When you talk about 3 techniques defending, especially that strong side B gap, Tyleik Williams was second in the nation behind Mason Graham in run defense grade when he was in the B gap, right? I think that would be a nice compliment to Ed Oliver, who moves all over the place. I just think if he got to the 50s, I think he'd be a perfect fit for them, for as much as Sean McDermott wants to play a 4-down front. And then my day 3 guy is another safety. You've mentioned a couple already, but I'll go with Malachi Moore from Alabama. And I think just somebody back there who's experienced and well-taught in coverage, played for a long time, obviously, under Nick Saban at Alabama, can play in the safety, play a deep half, play in the slot as well. I think Malachi Moore would help a unit that actually the Bills safety unit was the lowest. They had the lowest coverage grade in the league last year. So I think safety could also be a point of emphasis here. Kevin Winston Jr. was another guy I thought about, but I wanted to get Tyleik Williams as my ideal day 2 guy, but it wouldn't shock me at all. What if they wound up with both of those two, Tyleik Williams and Kevin Winston in the second round? I think it would make a lot of sense too, but I think corner, D tackle, safety are all positions they're going to attack in this draft.
I think you did fantastic with this. You don't have to sell me on Trey Amos. I think that's a great pick for the Buffalo Bills. I think Tyleik Williams is ideal for them if he can last that long. I don't know if he's going to be there for them, but again, I think it's a really good call out. Maybe if they can't, like a CJ West, right, who you've talked about already for the Houston Texans, like that could be if people want to say like, okay, well, Tyleik Williams isn't going to last that long. CJ West, I just like the thought process there of the type of player that they're getting. Maybe a Jordan Phillips or something if it's in the third round, if they're waiting a little bit longer than that. And then I really do like the Malachi Moore selection there. I'm worried about Malachi Moore's just overall athleticism. I don't think he could be a full-time slot like he was his freshman year when he was at Alabama getting on the field. There's a reason why they put in Brian Branch over him that next season. And when I look him at the safety level, I don't think he has that single high range to him. But I think he's really smart. Nick Saban spoke extremely highly of him and how he approaches the game from a preparational standpoint, from a mental standpoint when it's going on. And I'd love him in a 2-high safety set like the Buffalo Bills run a lot of. So I don't love Malachi Moore in every situation, but I really do think that you could get the best out of whatever Malachi Moore is with the Buffalo Bills. So I just wanted to point that out. I really do love that one. Let's start in the NFC East with the Dallas Cowboys, and Jihad Campbell is the ideal pick for them here in the first round. I really do. I understand running back's tempting. I could have said Ashton Shenty, maybe say Amari and Hampton. Look, with them at least bringing in DeAndre Swift and having Javonte Williams, I think you're okay at running back. You don't have to force it here. And in fact, I don't have running back in any of these picks here that I have for their ideal 3-day haul. Now, it doesn't mean that they wouldn't draft running back. I just would rather prioritize other positions. And if a running back that you love happens to be on the board in the second, third, fourth round, whatever it is, you could pick one there. But I ended up going with Jihad Campbell here because for as much as they made some additions at the linebacker level, I like the signing of Jack Sanborn. I think that's an underrated one. Bringing in Kenneth Murray, I don't love, but it's fine. Whatever. It's another linebacker body. Maris Liufau, I liked in last year's draft, but there's a reason why he's sort of a mid-round pick there. DeMarvion Overshown is recovering from a major knee injury. So if you get Jihad Campbell, I think that changes things. I really do. I think that Jihad Campbell and Jack Sanborn would be your starting 2 linebackers on day 1. And I think that's a pretty decent 1-2 punch there that you have in the middle of the defense. So it makes that defense a lot better, especially at the second level. I'm going to go with Elk Iomaner for the day 2 selection for the Dallas Cowboys. I know that they're in on wide receiver, could even draft one at number 12 overall, even if it is not Tetro McMillan, could be any of those wide receivers. I think Jerry wants to make a sexy pick this year. I think he wants to make a splash at the playmaker spot. So here I have them going Elk Iomaner. He's somebody somebody who will block his ass off for you. He can play as an X. He's got the track background to be able to threaten vertically despite being a bigger wide receiver. I like Alec Iomaner a lot. And right now you look at Jalen Tolbert, you look at CeeDee Lamb, Jonathan Mingo, right? I mean, like, that's their wide receiver room right now. I think that Iomaner immediately gets on the field with CeeDee Lamb. I think that that's possible there, and then Tolbert can just be your vertical stretching guy that you like. So that's my day 2 selection there for the Cowboys. And then on day 3, let's go with Cameron Jackson from Florida, the long, strong nose tackle, defensive tackle type of a player who I don't know how much he's ever going to give you in pass rush. Doesn't really matter for the Dallas Cowboys. They have to get more stout on the interior at nose and even at 3 tech. They have to be a much better run defense team than they were at the beginning of last year. And that's exactly what Jackson does. So if you can get a guy like that in the 4th, 5th round, he's not really going to bring you much as a pass rusher. That's why you could probably get him early on day 3, but it ain't going to be too far into day 3 because of how strong this guy is and the length that he has. So I think it's perfect for what the Cowboys need. So Jahad Campbell, Alec Iomaner, Cameron Jackson, those are my 3 for Dallas.
I think that's a great call with Iomaner in round 2. I think if they go with a defensive player, which I think most likely they should in the 1st round, if they wind up with one of either Iomaner or Jaden Higgins in the 2nd round, I think they did a fantastic job. They're missing that big size X receiver out there that can be the complement to CeeDee Lamb, even open things up vertically. And look, if all the coverage is tilted towards Lamb, then you take that guy in a one-on-one matchup, right? I think it's a great call on Iomaner. Him or Jaden Higgins would be the 2 guys I would be targeting at receiver in the 2nd round. I understand if Tetero McMillan falls to them at 12, you do have to think about it because, other than maybe Travis Hunter, he's the best receiver in the draft. But if you're going defense round 1, that's a perfect guy to target in round 2 as Iomaner. That's awesome.
Okay, who's next for you?
Miami Dolphins, and there's been a lot of debate about what they should draft or what they're going to do, and now that there's Jalen Ramsey, I won't even say trade rumors, they are actively trying to trade Jalen Ramsey possibly by draft week. I want to go offensive line here. And now considering a potential Ramsey trade, I just don't think they're going to do it. I think it's almost a shoo-in at this point. They're going to attack the secondary. I'll say Will Johnson for the Dolphins. Just get that direct outside replacement for Jalen Ramsey. Because right now, if they trade Ramsey, that might be the worst secondary in football. They already lost Javon Holland. They're signing stopgaps at safety. It's really tough to envision where this Dolphins secondary is going if they trade Jalen Ramsey, and it sounds like they're really trying to. So I'll go Will Johnson in the 1st round. 2nd round, I think about a guy who maybe could replace that role that Calais Campbell played. Now he's on to Arizona. Head up. A lot of times they like to get in a 3-4 and have those head up defensive ends over the tackles. I think Alfred Collins is somebody who would fit in and be a replacement for that role. Does he give you a ton as a pass rusher? No, but he's long, he's strong, he's used to playing head up. He could play the 0 over the center. He could play anywhere outside of the 5 technique over the tackles. I love Alfred Collins. I think he should be a 2nd round pick. I think he's one of the best run defenders in this class, and I think to replace Calais Campbell in the role that he played in their defense, I think Collins would be a perfect player. And then day 3 guy I'm going to go with, I think he's a round 4 guy. I think consensus maybe is a slight bit, maybe a round lower on him. Luke Kandra from Cincinnati is an interesting prospect for me, especially for one of these Shanahan teams. He's one of the most experienced and effective outside zone blockers in college football over the last couple of years. Taller guy, definitely plays with more finesse, works to get his footwork across and create angles. You're not going to get the most powerful downhill presence, but I think Luke Kandra, actually, if they got him in round 4, I could see him actually competing for that starting left guard spot because he's a really good system fit, and that's where the biggest hole in this Dolphins offensive line is, especially after Chris Greer really gave an endorsement for Patrick Paul as their left tackle. Let's get a mid-round guard in there, and Luke Kandra is experiencing that outside zone scheme.
Okay, I like it. I like that haul for the Dolphins, and they have a lot of needs now, man. I think that Dolphins window might be closing here. I don't know what there is to really hang your hat on with the Dolphins roster versus, some of the disasters that we saw from last year. But hey, for Dolphins fans' sakes, I hope I'm wrong. Let's go to the Philadelphia Eagles now. It could be anybody, right? I mean, Philly, I almost used as a joke said best player available. Like it literally doesn't matter for the Philadelphia Eagles. They're so deep. They're so well prepared to lose guys in free agency and have guys, coming in and being able to take starting spots. Day 1, I went with Nicky Manwari. Why? Because they sort of have a safety need, although I think a lot of people are sleeping on Sidney Brown. I think Sidney Brown's going to be a fantastic replacement for C.J. Gardner-Johnson. But Why not just draft Nicky Manwari and try to get the most out of him as an athlete, right? He could play free safety for you. He could play strong safety for you. Maybe you want him more at the second level. I thought sometimes he didn't play as physical as you would want a second level defender to do. But hey, for the Philadelphia Eagles, you could take a flyer on this guy and say, look, we've got the ability, we've got the roster to put him in really good spots, and perhaps he ends up being just an insane defensive chess piece for us. So I've never really made this pick before in a mock draft, but I just went with the safety spot, and I went with Nicky Manwari for them there. In the second round, I'm going to go with Omar Norman Lott. He's one of my favorite players in this class. He's a top 30 player for me. It does not feel like the NFL is going to draft him in the first round. He feels much more like a second or third round pick, given the fact that he just was not on the field a lot in run defense snaps. They didn't really ask him to defend the run too much, although he had a really high solo run stop percentage this past year when he was asked to defend the run. He also had a very high pass rush win percentage, very high pass rush grade against true pass sets. And so why not get him in the mix with Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis? I think that could be an excellent trio there on the interior for the Philadelphia Eagles. And the last one, early day three, let's go with Kobe Bryant. Why? Because who doesn't want Kobe Bryant in their cornerback room with the attitude? Like the great attitude that you have, the true dog that you have there with him. They've got some corners on the roster. You know, obviously they have Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. They've got another spot that we're sort of going to sort out here in training camp and as we get into the regular season with Darius Slay not being there anymore. But, you know, whether it's a guy like Keely Ringo or Dory Jackson, you could draft Kobe Bryant and say, hey, if either of those guys don't work out, we have somebody that maybe we have faith in to be able to step in either this year or in the future. And he's somebody who's just going to bring a lot of pride to that cornerback room, coming in and getting drafted by the reigning Super Bowl champions. And you know that he is going to have that competitiveness that you want on the team to potentially repeat there. So Nicky Manwari, Omar Norman Lott, Kobe Bryant for the Philadelphia Eagles, honestly, could have gone in a million different directions with best player available, but those are the ideal players that I have for them. Who's next for you?
Let's go with the New York Jets. And the fun part here is Trevor, in our 7-round mock draft that you and I are doing with 30 other analysts here at PFF that's going to be published on the website next week. These are 3 picks that I actually made for the Jets in that mock draft. So, of course, I think they're ideal, right? We'll go early on. For as much as I would love the Jets to take Shedeur Sanders at 7. It sure sounds like they're not going to do that. So I'm going to go with the tight end, Tyler Warren. I think, look, the Jets, they had the 3rd worst tight end unit in the league last year. They don't have much of anything if on the receiving side, right, where they've got Jeremy Rucker, they've got Stone Smart. Both those guys project as backups. I think Tyler Warren and what he did this past year at Penn State, both on the receiving side and the blocking side, I think it's the perfect fit for what Aaron Glenn's trying to bring to the culture of this team, right? When you talk about Tanner Engstrand's offense, probably running a lot of 12 personnel, especially with Justin Fields and Breece Hall and Braylon Allen, everything they have in the backfield. I think it's going to be run heavy. I think it's going to be play action heavy. I think there's a lot that Tyler Warren can add. He's the closest tight end we have in this draft stylistically to George Kittle, that two-way guy that can, rumble through the defense with the ball in his hands and make big-time blocks up front, right? So Tyler Warren in the first round. I know a lot of the noise has been about Armand Membu. I just think we have other opportunities there to get at least a serviceable right tackle. So that's where I'm going next. I think a great guy, if he were to get early into round 3 for the Jets to have at right tackle, I think a plug-and-play starter is Ozzie Trapilo from Boston College. I think this is the alternative if you're not going Membu in the first round. This is the guy that I'm really looking at for the Jets. 6'8", aggressive downhill blocker from Boston College. Better athlete than you think he is, right? He's got a lot better feet than you think he would. We saw that down at the Senior Bowl. I think Ozzie Trapilo should be a big-time target on day 2, even if they've got to maneuver a few spots to find him. But, he might not be an all-pro down the line, but I think that's a solid, sturdy starter there that you could get on day 2 in Trapilo. And then day 3, a guy, I've been talking about this match a lot. First of all, because his dad played with Aaron Glenn on the Jets back in the day. And second of all, I think he's just a really darn good football player. Give me R.J. Mickens from Clemson at safety. The Jets need some depth at safety. Andre Sisco's on a 1-year deal. Tony Adams is a decent player, but you could upgrade. I think Mickens would be a fantastic fit in this defense and possibly a starter by the time we get into year 2 of him.
Yeah, I love the Ozzie Trapilo call out. I'm a big fan of his. I have him for another team coming up here shortly, so I could talk a little bit more about Ozzie Trapilo. Then the New York Giants, so many different directions that they could go, right? I think the ideal draft haul, I suppose, is Travis Hunter. I probably should have written his name down, but for the people who made the graphics, I won't throw them off too much. I said Abdul Carter because I just don't think that Travis Hunter is going to be available for them. I think Travis Hunter is going to go number 2 overall. So to be honest, I think the ideal haul for them is to get Travis Hunter, but I wrote down Abdul Carter because I think he's the next best available, and I wouldn't want them to force some sort of selection at like quarterback, trading back, whatever it is. Just take the really damn good player, and don't let somebody else draft the guy who I think is going to be a stud pass rusher in this league, and you got to watch him be really successful for another football team. So I went with Abdul Carter here, and again, like I said, Travis Hunter would be the pick here if they had the opportunity to draft him. Day 2 selection, I went with Jalen Milroe. Love the idea of him getting to work with Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll is obviously somebody who many people have talked about it, really helped Josh Allen become more consistent. That is the biggest issue with Jalen Milroe as well, consistency. Now, it's not to say it immediately changes if he gets drafted by Brian Daboll, but I think that it is at least an ideal landing spot for them. And so I don't love the idea of them forcing a quarterback at number 3. I like them thinking about it there at the top end of the second round or the third round, something like that. So wherever you get him, I would go with Jalen Milroe here. Obviously, he brings you a really high floor as a rushing threat. What he is as a dual threat quarterback. You just see what he can be with Brian Daboll, and so I think that's an ideal landing spot for them. And then on day 3, this is a player who I don't know if he goes day 3. It might be more of a third rounder. I just haven't heard a lot about him. Anthony Belton, he was once talked about as one of the better offensive tackles in this draft class sort of before the season started. And then he played fine at offensive tackle, and I thought he had a pretty dang good week at the Senior Bowl as well, but it just seems like nobody's really talking about him. So if you can get Anthony Belton, who's played at offensive tackle, but he's got the size and strength to be able to play guard, I'm sticking him inside at guard. I think he could be a plug-and-play type of a dude instead of Greg Van Roten, who we said this on the show earlier this week. Wasn't exactly the Giants' plan A to bring him back to start for them again. I think they ran out of options after swinging and missing a little bit in free agency. So if you get Anthony Belton, he can start at guard for you, or he can start at tackle if you think Jermaine Illuminor is better at guard and you think Belton's better at tackle. You just have a little bit of flexibility there. So investing in the offensive line somewhere on day 3, I think Belton is an ideal player to be able to do that. So I went with Abdul Carter, Jalen Milroe, Anthony Belton there for the New York Giants. Last team for you in this division. What is it?
Yeah, so the New England Patriots. And for as much as I want to say Abdul Carter, I kind of want to say Tetairoa McMillan, but I knew you were taking Carter with the Giants. And McMillan, it just doesn't, I don't think it sounds like they would surprise us and go with that. Let's just go with Will Campbell and the one that's being most projected right now, the Patriots. The biggest hole in their entire team right now is left tackle. Mike Vrabel believes Will Campbell's the left tackle despite the length questions. Plug and play, your offensive line gets a lot better when you're talking about Campbell being in there. Consistent 3-year player in the SEC. He was a star there. The only guys that really gave him issues were guys with more powerful, rush plans when you talk about guys like Jared Verse or even a Chris Braswell down there. But Campbell's such a fundamentally sound blocker that he raises the floor big time on that Patriots offensive line. Day 2, I was looking at the running back position, and I'm looking at a couple of guys that, and I was trying not to do any repeats for certain teams, and I was trying to get certain guys in different spots. But let me go with Dylan Sampson from Tennessee. I think this is somebody, especially in Josh McDaniels' gap scheme run game, that is a little bit, it's got some similarities to what he ran at Tennessee, where they ran a lot of power, a lot of counter, getting behind those pulling guards, seeing it, cutting up field, and then, breaking tackles on the second level, working through contact. I think Dylan Sampson could be particularly that early down workhorse back. I don't know how much he gives you in the receiving game. They just didn't run a lot of it. They don't run a lot of passing concepts for the backs at Tennessee. I know that's been controversial lately too, but, Dylan Sampson I think would be a nice back to work in the rotation in New England. And then day 3 edge rusher that I've watched more recently, and I think he's got a lot of similarities to Josiah Stewart from Michigan. I think he's going to go after Stewart, but David Walker from down there in Central Arkansas, you want some dominant tape to watch? That guy is a stand-up edge rusher. First of all, he's 120 miles an hour all the time, and he's just got this explosiveness off the edge. And even when you look at Central Arkansas, when they came up and played FBS opponents, Ole Miss, Oklahoma State, Arkansas State this year was absolutely dominant. He's put together good tape against higher level competition. David Walker is going to be a name. Maybe he even sneaks into the back end of round 3, but I think in round 4, whoever gets that guy is getting at least somebody who's an explosive rotational edge rusher that maybe there's higher opinions of him, but I watched him and I was like, man, that feels like a Mike Vrabel type of football player, David Walker from Central Arkansas.
I could definitely believe it. I could absolutely see that being the case with David Walker going to Mike Vrabel and the New England Patriots. The last team that I have in the NFC East is the Washington Commanders. Ideal round 1 draft haul for them. if Mike Green can make it to them in the back end of the first round, I think he is the player that they want. I mean, his film is first round worthy. He would immediately, in my opinion, be the best edge rusher on the team, or at least the best pass rusher on the team right away. And that's really what they need. I know they need to get better in run defense, but they also have to get guys that can win one-on-one and get to the passer. I know they were able to do that decently as a collective last year, but they need a one-on-one pass rush winner. We saw in the Ohio State game when Marshall played Ohio State that Mike Green was able to do that against some pretty good competition. So for me, that is the direction that I would go. I would be looking at edge rusher, really not just Mike Green, but Donovan Ezeraku, James Pierce Jr., Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart. Like those guys, I would all consider there for them. Michael Williams in that conversation, I guess, as well, but I don't think he's going to, I just don't think he's going to be a great pass rusher at the NFL level. I think he would help in run defense if that's really what they want to invest in, but edge rusher and Mike Green, I think, is the best that you could realistically choose from with them at the back end of the first round. On day 2, they have talked about wanting to get more dynamic at the running back position. You just brought this player up. I promise I'm not copying you. We got the graphic that's going to come, and it's going to prove me right here. Dylan Sampson from Tennessee. That's who I would go with here as the dynamic running back to pair with Brian Thomas Jr. and Austin Eckler as he's getting a little bit older. I think that Eckler can be a really good RB3, operate in third down opportunities, but Sampson gives you that juice. Sampson gives you that home run ability, that change up, if you will. I guess I should call it he would be the fastball, I guess is what I should say, because he is somebody that can break a run open at any time for a 40-50 yard run down the field. We saw that a lot this past year at Tennessee. I'm really bummed that he got hurt and we didn't get to see him versus Ohio State. I still don't think that Tennessee would have beaten Ohio State, but I think it would have been a lot of fun to watch him and their best offensive weapon be out there against the Buckeyes. So I think he is the change of pace in a good way. I guess really more like hitting the gas pedal that they would want there in their running back room. And then on day 3, let's go Zy Alexander, the corner from LSU. I feel like I'm higher on Zy Alexander than most people. I understand he's not the best athlete at the position, but I think he is adequate enough. And when you look at, Marshawn Lattimore, they traded for him. He had his struggles even when he was healthy on the team. I don't think he's going to take over Lattimore's spot next year, but you look at even beyond Lattimore, Bobby Price, Kevon Seymour. They have Jonathan Jones as well, which I think was a key addition for them to help the depth of that cornerback room. Noah Igbenogany, he's probably going to be a little bit more of the in-and-out nickel with Mike Sainristil still. I like the idea of them getting Zy Alexander as somebody who can play in press coverage, but is also pretty good in off coverage as well. I think he's got good length. I think he's got great ball skills, really high forced and completion percentage that we saw from him at Southeast Louisiana and while he was a starter at LSU. So he's just got a knack for making plays on the football, but lack of athleticism probably pushes him to the beginning of day 3. I think that would be a good selection there for the Commanders if they don't address corner a little bit earlier. Dalton, before I talk about our friends over at Jack Link's Duos, Salensi with the $5 super chat. Appreciate you, Salensi. Just wanted to say, when are we getting the PFF Dalton hats? Need to dual wield those with the future NFLSC merch. We're doing hats over at NFLSC. I'm still setting up the shop for that, but apparently there's a demand for you to have some signature hats. I don't know what they'd look like. You guys have merch for like the college show? That might be.
We don't.
You might need to get that. The demand is there.
We may have to figure if the demand is there. Look, there's no bigger fan of hats than me. If I had my own hat, if we had a PFF Dalton line of hats, or even a PFF College Football Show line of hats, I'd be all about it. But yeah, I mean, you'd probably see me on here wearing it every day. For as conceited as that might sound, but yeah, no, I'd be all about it. I might have to talk to some people behind the scenes about that one.
All I'm saying is the demand seems to be there. So might need to think about a design over the next couple of days, and we might need to get this bad boy into launch and into production. PFF's draft coverage is brought to you by our friends over at Jack Link's Duos. Jack Link's knows that there is nothing like a great duo. That's why they've created the new Jack Link's Duos. What it does is it combines 2 different flavors of beef jerky in one bag. It's not 2 flavors that are on the same piece of beef jerky. It's 2 handfuls of beef jerky, different flavors that are in the same bag. So you get 1 bite of one flavor, 1 bite of the other. It's fantastic. They got a lot of really great flavors. I love the mango and habanero. That one's my favorite. They got teriyaki and original. They've got buffalo and ranch as well. Jack Links knows that the NFL draft can give us some great duos, right? Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase getting reunited in the NFL. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, great wide receiver duo that was set up via the NFL draft. How about Emeka Egbuka and Nico Collins? This is one that Dalton called out a little bit earlier in his ideal draft haul here. If Emeka Egbuka goes to the Houston Texans, what an incredible 1-2 wide receiver duo this would be. We already mentioned Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp being a great wide receiver duo that was set up in the NFL. This could be the next one. I love Emeka Egbuka. You see the overall grade there, 79.5, but he is graded higher than that throughout his college career. Nico Collins, one of the highest graded wide receivers that we have had in the NFL over the last couple of years. He is a dominant X receiver, and then Emeka Egbuka could be a fantastic flanker or Z wide receiver with CJ Stroud throwing the football. I know we talk about offensive line for the Texans, but man, I think I like this 1-2 combo a lot. I already talked about some great 1-2 combos that we like from Jack Link's and the duo combinations that they have. You can find Jack Link's duos wherever you get Jack Link's beef jerky. Local convenience store, select Walmart. So make sure you guys go check them out. Arizona with the $5 super chat say you mocked Cam Horsley to Chicago at 72. No, I did not. He's saying I thought that you had a round 6 or 7 projection. Shamar Turner, Alfred Collins, CJ West, are they long gone by then? So what we're doing here is it's not like round 1, round 2, round 3 projections. It's day 1, day 2, and then day 3 projections for Chicago. So for the Bears, they pick at 10, 39, 41, 72, and then their only day 3 selections are 148 in the 5th round, 233 in the 7th round, and then 240. So I was thinking of Horsley as like, okay, maybe at 148 if you like him enough to draft him there in the 5th round, but he could also potentially be there for you in the 7th. I think he's more of like a 5th-ish round pick, so that was why I ended up going with Cam Horsley, not drafting him at 72, like you mentioned. A couple of those names there, Alfred Collins, CJ West, Shamar Turner, I'd like those guys much better at 72, closer to my big board, but for day 3, Chicago not having a 4th round pick and then having a later 5th round pick, that is why I brought up Cam Horsley there. Says, thanks for clarity. Misunderstood. No worries. That's why we like doing this this exercise, because it gives you the full scope of day 1, day 2, and day 3 there. Last 2 divisions that we're talking about here is the AFC West and the NFC West. Dalton, who we start with here?
We'll start with the Denver Broncos and a haul that I think Bo Nix and Sean Payton are really going to like. Now, I'll start with the 1st round pick. I have warmed up to the idea of Amarion Hampton being a 1st-round pick. He's RB2. I think for most people, certainly for me, I think he's pretty clearly the 2nd best back in this draft. And I think the highest that I would take him, I know there's been mock drafts that have had him higher, but the highest that I would take him is probably number 20 at Denver. And I know Sean Payton has talked about getting those jokers, those mismatches in his offense, but I think he also needs a workhorse back, right? Their running back room right now, it's Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime. I like them better in complementary roles. I think Hampton could be the workhorse for this offense, especially behind this offensive line. Look, Denver was very low in the rushing grade rankings for the running backs, very low in yards after contact rankings as well. Hampton, that's the 2 things right there. Really the big thing there is you're talking about yards after contact. 2nd in the nation over the past couple years behind Ashton Jeanty in yards after contact. This is just the big workhorse that you want over and over, getting 20, 25, maybe even some days 30 carries in this offense behind this fantastic offensive line. So that's where I'm starting in the first one. Day 2, I'm looking at wide receiver. Round 2, most likely, I'm looking at Jaden Higgins. And this is a team that didn't do so well, again, in the intermediate range, that 10 to 19-yard range. It got some guys who can work after the catch. I think about Marvin Mims, especially underneath. Cortland Sutton can get vertical. We know his ability to make fantastic catches deep down the field. But Jaden Higgins is that intermediate chain mover. Had a perfect 99.9 intermediate receiving grade this past year at Iowa State. I think it's 6'4" with the release package that he has and the route running that he has. Very underrated for his size. I think Higgins would be a great 2nd-round pick for him. And then I look at day 3 in that round 4 or 5 range. I think we could still get one more tight end in this room. I know they brought in Evan Ingram, but he's more of that F kind of move around, move tight end that you can do a lot of different things with. Let's get a classic guy in there who can block and get up the seam a little bit. Sean Payton's always got a guy on his team like this who can block, he can get up the seam, he can make an occasional catch down the seam for you. You know, I think about late career Jeremy Shockey, Josh Hill, Adam Troutman, guys like that. Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame, I think, is someone that would appeal to Sean Payton. It would be that complementary piece to Evan Ingram. Ingram would obviously get more targets. He's the better receiving threat, better after the catch with the ball in his hands. But if you want a fundamentally sound blocker with really good size and somebody who I think is just that big body up the seam that Bo Nix could give a chance down the middle of the field, I think Mitchell Evans could be that guy in round 4 or 5 for him.
I love the call out. I love getting some Mitchell Evans love in the show because I think he is underrated, man. I really do. We talked about him as maybe one of the top tight ends in the class going into the season. He wasn't quite that season, but he's an all-around dude. He could block for you. He give you the tough contested catches. he's not the best athlete out there, but I love the shout out there. I think the Broncos could really use him as a depth tight end. I think that's a good call there. Arizona Cardinals, the first team that I'm talking about here with the NFC West. Round one, a lot of different options that they could have. And honestly, like with them bringing in Dalvin Tomlinson, with them having Darius Robinson, with them bringing in Calais Campbell, maybe it's not defensive line as much. They could certainly go interior defensive line, but you got Josh Sweat as well. You brought back Baron Browning, got Zaven Collins on the team. Like, okay, like it could be an edge rusher, but it doesn't have to be. I've done Will Johnson I think we've talked about Will Johnson for a couple of these teams. I think he is an option for them, but I also really like Jahdae Barron. And I like Jahdae Barron specifically in Jonathan Gannon's defense because I think he can play man coverage, although he is better in zone, and there was more zone work from the Arizona Cardinals last year. I don't know if it was just because they didn't feel like they had the front to be able to play man coverage or the corners to be able to play man coverage, or maybe it was just the fact that he's more comfortable playing in that zone. If he is, I think Jahdae Barron is an excellent selection there for him. Had an elite 90.5 coverage grade this past season as an outside corner, but he's played in the slot as well. He has played as a safety. I think he could be a chess piece type of a player for Jonathan Gannon on that defense. On day two, I'm going to go with Ozzie Trapillo, somebody that you have talked about here on this show, somebody who's a really good man and gap scheme power running type of offensive tackle, right? That is what he does best. Not to say that he can't get on the run and block a little bit inside zone or mid zone for you. I think he can, but just in those offenses that are really just going to try to push you downhill, this is the guy. I think he's a really good pass protector. He's not as long with arm length as you would think from his 6'7", 6'8" frame, but he still has adequate length for the offensive tackle position. And I think that he would be a really good selection for them because specifically the Cardinals ran power and man and gap scheme run blocking concepts almost 60% of the time last season. One of the highest clips in the NFL, and Drew Petzing is still their offensive coordinator, and he was for them last year as well. On day three, I'm going to double dip. I'm going to go double dip along the offensive line, and I'm going to say Luke Kandra. Now, you mentioned Luke Kandra, a little bit more of a zone blocking scheme type of an offensive line, but if you can get a player like this, I just think he's got a good potential starting ceiling to him. And so it wins a little bit more by being an athlete, but perhaps they're still able to lean in that a little bit more. Perhaps he's able to get a little bit stronger at the NFL level. And so this is just an offensive lineman that I felt pretty good about. Again, like an Anthony Belton would also be great for them if he's available somewhere in the early parts of day three. So we already talked about him as a potential shout out, but I wrote down Luke Kandra just because I think even later, maybe fifth round, something like that, could be a nice offensive line investment that might be able to pay off some dividends for them. So that's my three. Those are my three players for the Arizona Cardinals: Jahdae Barron, Ozzie Trapillo, Luke Kandra. Who's your next team here in their draft haul?
Let's go with Jim Harbaugh's L.A. Chargers. And this is a team that we're trying to find more weapons for, and maybe we're trying to fix the defensive line a little bit. It's going to be one of the more interesting cases of what order and what their strategy is for going about their positions of need in this draft. I started, though, with the Michigan connection at tight end, Colston Loveland. Look, I think this is somebody obviously Harbaugh's familiar with. When he's healthy, when his shoulder is healthy, which it wasn't for the most part this past year, he's a much better blocker than he's given credit for. And, for as much as Tyler Warren, we do have him as tight end one ahead of Loveland, but you could easily argue that Loveland's a more fluid route runner, and Harbaugh has a great idea of what this guy can do from any alignment on the field, out wide, in the slot, in line, off the ball, it doesn't matter. He runs routes like a wide receiver, and I think the dimension that he would add, I should say, to this offense and the mismatches that he creates, I think about him like TJ Hawkinson or somebody. I don't want to say Travis Kelce because he's the best to ever do it, but it's in that style of just a guy that we can line up anywhere on the field, and he's a mismatch almost no matter who he's going against. Linebackers, they're not quick enough for him. Corners are too small for him. It's just a dynamic weapon that I think Harbaugh's familiar with, and he would know how to use him in this offense. Day two, I'm looking at running back. I know they signed Najee Harris to a one-year deal, but I'm looking for somebody who can give them that physical element to this run game. Give me Cam Skattebo. You mean to tell me Jim Harbaugh isn't watching?
Yeah, brother.
You mean to tell me Jim Harbaugh doesn't watch Cam Skattebo's tape and just go, oh, yeah, that's it. That's my kind of guy. That's a darn football player right there. I think you put him in this power scheme with Greg Roman. I mean, look, Harbaugh, everyone talks about Skattebo's 40 time and this and that. Did he not make a Super Bowl with Frank Gore as his primary running back? I mean, is he really going to give a damn about 40 time when a guy runs like that? And Skattebo's got underrated receiving ability that I don't think exists in their running back room right now. That would be the feature back for me in this offense is Cam Skattebo. And then the third guy I'm going to go with is a guy you mentioned earlier, Maybe he's a late third round, sneaks into the top 100 pick. I think he's going to be more of a fourth rounder, but I'm cheating it here a little bit. I'm going to bring Jamari Caldwell into the mix here. And the Chargers losing Poona Ford, I mentioned before I can split things into different gaps that guys are defending. Poona Ford was a top 5 defender in the A-gaps last season at defensive tackle, up there with guys like Dexter Lawrence, I believe, was leading that category. And to lose that guy and the impact that Ford had on the interior, Caldwell is somebody who back in his days at Houston didn't play in the A-gaps at all. He was such a good athlete for his size that they put him all over the place, 3 technique, head up over tackles, doing all these different things. He goes to Oregon and they basically say, hey, look, you can do all these things. We're going to move you around a little bit. We need you in the A-gaps in our system. And he said, okay. And he was one of the best A-gap defenders in the country this year at Oregon. So I think if you're talking about direct Poona Ford replacement, Jamari Caldwell could be that guy if he gets to the Chargers in round 4.
Elite haul. Love it. I really do. I love it here for the Chargers. Obviously it's like, okay, well, they're hitting tight end instead of wide receiver. So if you feel okay about that, I think you're checking the rest of the boxes. You get the interior defensive lineman that you want. You get a running back that could really help out. And obviously Colson Loveland moonlights as a wide receiver, like a slot wide receiver anyway. So I really like this one for the Los Angeles Chargers. Solensi gave us a $20 super chat. We love you, Solensi. Thank you so much for this. Do have a legit stat here. Okay. Jack Besh and Kyle Williams. So TCU wide receiver, Jack Besh, Washington State wide receiver Kyle Williams are in rare air and not in a good way. Their snap counts exceeded over 85% on one side of the line of scrimmage, and historically, snap counts on one side over 70% have been littered with busts. He says to follow up on this too, the names include guys like Corey Coleman, Dorial Green Beckham, a whole lot other guys like that. The only hits have been Drake London, DJ Moore, Juju Smith-Schuster, Josh Reynolds. Interesting. Very interesting. Look, I don't love when a wide receiver only lines up on one side of the line of scrimmage, but sometimes it could also just be because of offensive structure, right? Sometimes it could be familiarity with the quarterback. They always know, like, okay, if I am looking to my left, I have this wide receiver. I have this player. I have Jack Besh on my left. So sometimes it can be a little bit more quarterback driven and just overall offensive scheme driven than inability from a wide receiver to move around. But I think that this is an interesting stat and an interesting shout out from Solensi because I often know, at least when somebody plays both sides of the line, like think about that with corner too, right? Like a lot of corners are sort of tied to one side of the line of scrimmage. If they're both sides, if I watch them play both sides of the line, then I go, okay, this is actually a positive because you see that fluidity, you see that comfort. They have the natural ability to cover from the left and the right side. I think with wide receiver, I'm just saying it's a little bit more anchored to like what their college offense is doing. What do you think about that with wide receivers really maining one side of the line of scrimmage like this?
Something I think about with some of those other guys that were mentioned, Corey Coleman, Drake London, Besh playing at TCU, Williams playing at Washington State, is that's often a byproduct of not just the scheme, but the tempo that these teams are playing with. I think about Drake London at USC under Lincoln Riley, and they're trying to play in that extremely fast tempo, right, and get plays off by the time that it's 20 to 22 seconds on the play clock. And the easiest way to do that is to simplify the alignments, especially for the guys out wide who are working downfield and just need to get back to a certain spot because you're not getting too diverse in formations when you're running that quick a tempo to it. So if you leave them at least in a similar alignment on the same side, they always know their assignments. Before they had the green dots in college football, they would check the cue cards, they would get to their spot, they would know their route, right? So I think part of that comes with the tempo. You're right, you would like to see your receivers have a little more diversity and work from both sides of the line of scrimmage, but I don't think it's too often because okay, coaching staffs know this guy can run all his routes from the left side, but not the right side. They're going to work on that sort of thing in practice, right? And I think it's more about, to me, it speaks something of tempo with all those schools you just mentioned. And TCU, under Sonny Dykes in particular, is going to run a blazing fast tempo when they can get in a rhythm on offense. So I don't see it as too much of a concern for Besh. I think we might have to go back to the LSU numbers a little bit. I know he didn't get a ton of volume there, but see how that looks as well on the other side. But I think it's a lot about the college tempo of how certain offenses are playing.
Yeah, like Corey Coleman, again, like came from the Baylor offense where that was like all that they were doing was just spread out stuff. And it was very, very fast tempo. Sometimes it's very annoying to scout and to watch. But hey, they're trying to win college football games. And so I totally understand it. But I think it's a good call out by you as well. Getting back to this, San Francisco 49ers. The ideal draft haul for them, in my opinion, offensive line. If you can get Armand Membou or Will Campbell at number 11, one of those two dudes, I ended up writing down Armand Membou. You could play him at guard immediately this year if you feel good about Colton McKivitz playing offensive tackle. And then moving forward, if Trent Williams is still going to be your offensive tackle moving forward, you can move Armand Membou over to right tackle. If Trent Williams is going to hang him up at some point soon, you can move Membou to the other offensive tackle spot. So he's an immediate starter at guard for you. And then he is, I think, an immediate starter at tackle whenever you maybe move on, whether by choice or, forced to, then I think that you have an offensive tackle in waiting that you feel good about. So I'm going Membou on day one for the 49ers. Day two, I'm going Omar Norman-Lott again. They do not have a pass rushing interior presence that you can really rely upon. They've got Jordan Elliott. They have Evan Anderson, Kevin Givens, Kalia Davis. These are guys where, in my opinion, Omar Norman-Lott is immediately the best pass rushing, one gap penetrating defensive tackle that they have on the team, to pair along with guys like Drake Jackson and Nick Bosa. Yetur Gross-Matos is on the team as well. They have to have more juice. I know they got to defend the run better as well, but they have to have more juice too, getting after the passer. It cannot just be Nick Bosa. I mean, if the Niners go into this year with just this group the way that it is, I'm worried that it's going to look similar to what Trey Hendrickson was last year with the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think Omar Norman-Lott at least relieves a little bit of that, and he can become that pass rush specialist, even if he's just a pass rush specialist for you as a rookie. I think that's really impactful for the 49ers, and then he could be hopefully more moving forward. And then on day three, let's go Noel Williams, the cornerback from Cal. He's somebody who I look at their cornerback room right now. They've got Renardo Green. They have Diamador Lenore, who could be sort of your slot and outside guy. But if you get Noel Williams, then Renardo Green can play man coverage for you. Noel Williams can play man coverage for you. And then Lenore can play a lot in this slot where he is super comfortable. So I think that keeps the style there. Now their defensive coordinator is Robert Saleh, who does a lot of cover three stuff. He does a lot of zone stuff. But from what we saw with the Jets over the last couple of years, not afraid to play the guys in man coverage when they have that man coverage ability. So we saw that with Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed. I don't think that they're going to shy away from that if they have the guys to be able to do it. So if you draft Noel Williams, it at least gives you that archetype there. So that's what I think for the 49ers. Who's your third team now?
Third team, let's go to the Kansas City Chiefs, the Super Bowl runner-up this year as opposed to the last 2 years. And somebody I think is a really good fit, whether it's at 31 or I had them trading up for him in our mock draft earlier this week. That's Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon. And I think what you're getting at him is just a really light on his feet, nimble pass protector. And look, if the priority is to protect Patrick Mahomes, I think this is a guy that you target late in the first round and you just go, okay, plug him in there. Look, again, they signed Jalen Moore to a 2-year contract. I don't know if he can play inside. I don't know if Connerly could play inside. However you want to handle that left guard spot as well, that's really the biggest weakness. But I think if you're looking at eventually if it's left tackle, right tackle, inside, wherever, I think you're getting a solid high-floor pass protector in Josh Connerly. His ceiling might not be as high as those two guys you just mentioned for Sam Fran or maybe even as a Josh Simmons. But I think if you're talking about a late first-round pass protector, Josh Connerly would fit in Kansas City just fine. I look at their running back position on day two, especially right at the end of the second round. And the Chiefs, look, they have Isaiah Pacheco. They have Kareem Hunt. These are power backs that are physical. They get them their 4 or 5 yards that they need. But I need some explosiveness, and I can't help but think about Travion Henderson being a really good fit within this committee because he's always worked his best when he's been in a committee. You don't see many games, especially recently, where he gets more than 15 carries, and that's fine. If he's in a committee with Pacheco, with Hunt, that's fine. I think he would immediately be a very good receiving option, an explosive receiving option out of the backfield on this team. I think Andy Reid could find plenty of ways to use Travion Henderson 13 to 17 times a game and get the most efficiency out of that speed that he has. And then my day three, guys, it was one that you mentioned earlier. And look, again, it's going to be a big theme, run stop and defensive tackles. But Cam Jackson from Florida is a guy I think would fit in here as well. Just that big, complimentary, early down nose tackle. They lost Tershawn Wharton in free agency. They're always looking for more run defense help on this defensive line. I think he'd be a good fit here. So I get pass protection. I get an explosive back that they don't currently have. And I get another run stuffer on day three.
Like it. For the Rams, ideal day three haul here, or 3-day haul, I should say, for the Los Angeles Rams. In the first round, I have them getting Jalen Walker, the linebacker from Georgia. I think he would be an excellent pick for the Los Angeles Rams. And look, I like Jalen Walker. I feel like I'm getting pegged as like the anti-Jalen Walker guy. Like I think you can't play in the league. No, I just don't love him in the top 10, the top 12, top 15. Like first half of the first round, that's where I get a little bit wary because I don't know where the difference-making traits are coming from. Is he going to be a difference maker at edge rusher? I don't know. I think he's going to be a great blitzer, but as a true edge rusher, I'm a little skeptical because of how he's built. And then as an off-ball linebacker, I see some, lack of instincts when it comes to that coverage ability. If you're going to be a great off-ball linebacker, there's a lot of guys that can run downhill and chase. That's not where the value comes from. The value comes from you being able to cover. So I'm just not a fan of him in the top half of the first round, but at the back end of the second round, for a team like the Los Angeles Rams, he can come in and play right away, and he is so coachable. I think he's got a high football IQ. Everybody raves about him. That's why we talk about him as the top end of the first round type of a guy. I love him in this defense. I think he would be a fantastic addition to that second level for them. And I think that they would give him the flexibility to be able to rush from all different angles. Rush up the middle as a true off-ball linebacker, rush off the edge as an outside linebacker, be able to play in coverage and be able to run and chase to the sideline. So I think that that's a good pick and a good destination there from him. I'm cheating a little bit here. Because my ideal day two player for the Los Angeles Rams is Jackson Dart. Now, the Rams don't have a second-round pick. They've traded that to the Carolina Panthers. So they don't have that. They don't pick until pick number 90. They have a third-round comp pick, so they pick at 101 as well. So maybe you could pair, those two picks, move up, maybe get into the second round, maybe draft yourself a Jackson Dart. But however they can make it happen, I would love Jackson Dart to be a Los Angeles Ram. I would love for him to back up Matthew Stafford. I think he is the ideal quarterback in this class who you could get in this situation, get with Sean McVay, get behind Matthew Stafford, really be able to develop, and then you feel good about allowing him to start probably halfway through his rookie contract when Matthew Stafford eventually retires, which I think is probably maybe 2 years away, maybe 1 year away, but I'll give it 2 years because of what he talked about this year. So I think Jackson Dart's the ideal pick for them there on day two. And then on day three, I'm going to go with Dorian Strong again, just because I think they need a corner. They run a lot of cover three stuff. They run a lot of zone stuff. And I think that he runs that off-zone coverage role pretty well. They're okay at corner, but they could definitely use some new bodies and somebody who could be a potential starter for them. So I ended up going with Dorian Strong again, the corner from Virginia Tech, to play that zone coverage role for the Rams. Last team for you here in this exercise in the AFC West, Las Vegas Raiders. What do you got here?
Las Vegas Raiders. So it's been back and forth with this number 6 overall pick, whether it was Ashton Jeanty or for me, whether it could be Tetsuo McMillan. I'm going with McMillan here. And I think just the vertical ability, the X receiver that they're missing in this offense. I love Jacoby Myers. I love Brock Bowers. We'll see if they're keeping Michael Mayer as another tight end. Obviously, they got other things they want to fix. But I think McMillan would be such a great complement to all of it. And with Geno Smith's ability to throw the ball down the field. Geno Smith, over the last 3 years, his 3 years starting in Seattle, 9th best passing grade in the league on 10-plus yard throws, and the second most big-time throws in the NFL behind Josh Allen. Tetsuo McMillan, over the last 2 years, is the highest-graded receiver in college football on 10-plus yard throws, and it makes sense why. He's 6'5", he's acrobatic as hell, he can move down the field very, very smoothly. I think Geno and Ted is a perfect pairing. I really do. You talk about those Jack Links duos we've been talking about. I think this would be my next one is Geno Smith and Tetsuo McMillan. I think it's a perfect fit, something they should legitimately think about at number 6 overall in that first round. Second pick, I'm going to take a guy, I think maybe he's at 37, you take him. Maybe at 68, you take him. I'm kind of in between on where he's going to go, but Darian Porter, with the size and speed that he has, that feels like somebody that Pete Carroll and Patrick Graham would really like at corner.
I like it.
Especially with all the cover 3 that they're most likely going to run there. I think Darian Porter, if he can get in the right zone scheme, I think in the second round, I could think about him at 37 for the Raiders. I think it's somebody who would be a perfect fit. And if you're not going to go corner early because you want an offensive weapon 6 overall, this is somebody you could restart your secondary with in the system that fits him very well. You don't have him in a ton of man-to-man, and the only question really with him is run support, but he's a cornerback. It is what it is, and he's really talented out there in coverage. And now, something I was thinking about, just in case the Raiders running back's going to be a big position of focus. It could be Ashton Jeanty. I acknowledge it could be either of those picks at 37, maybe one of the Ohio State backs at 68, a Cam Scatterbo. Let's just say they go McMillan and they focus on defense with their 2 day 2 picks. Then I'm really thinking about getting deeper in this running back class, maybe in round 4, let's say. guy I really like, I think is underrated, certainly underrated on consensus, and I actually have his RB11 in this class. Jarquez Hunter from Auburn. I think there's something to go here with him. If you get him behind the right offensive line, he's a hard runner. He's a big back. I think, he's got better speed than you think he does. I think he's got home run ability. He needs a little more polish with his vision, but I think Jarquez Hunter is one of the more underrated backs for all of the guys that we've talked about. There could be 20 to 25 backs drafted. I think he's one of the more underrated ones. Right now, I think on consensus, he's like a 6th-round pick. I would really think about him in the 4th round. I think he's got a boatload of potential.
I agree. He's just really solid, man. And he's really experienced. I think he was an engine for Auburn over the last couple of years. So I like this call out. I like him as a depth running back and potentially even a guy who maybe even could emerge as a starter for you. Last team that I have is the Seattle Seahawks. The ideal player in round 1 for the Seattle Seahawks, in my opinion, is Gray Zabel. He is the perfect pick for them on day 1 because he can start at center for you. He can start at left guard. He can start at right guard. You know that you have 3 spots on the interior offensive line that you would love to upgrade from. And I think if you are able to get him at number 18 in the 1st round, it gives you complete flexibility to play the board however it falls to you throughout the rest of the draft. So you feel good about Zabel, who is a really great athlete. He's got good grip strength to him, but how he can get out of his stance in those mid and outside zone runs is perfect for what Kubiak wants to do as the new offensive coordinator there. If you take what he did last year with the New Orleans Saints and say, okay, he's going to do a lot of similar things with the Seattle Seahawks. They ran a ton of zone run blocking plays last year. I think they had the least amount of power running concepts and were much more of a zone blocking team last year in New Orleans. And so Gray Zabel is the perfect fit for that. They have 2 2nd-round picks now. They got pick 50 and 52 now that they traded DK Metcalf to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I'm going to stick with offensive line. I think another perfect player for them is Jared Wilson, the center from Georgia, another zone blocking stud. He only started for 1 year this past year because he was waiting behind Cedric Van Pran the previous 2 seasons. And the second that Cedric Van Pran was getting to the NFL, graduating, he was like, yeah, Wilson's better than me. He's athletic. You guys will see. And he put up some really good tape this year in just his 1st year as a starter. But if you were to get that 1-2 combination, boom, you have the perfect 2 starters for you. One at guard, one at center that you feel really great about moving forward with Sam Darnold now as your quarterback. And then on day 3, let's go with an X receiver, okay? You got Cooper Kupp, you got Jackson Smith-Njigba. Let's go with Pat Bryant, the wide receiver from Illinois, somebody who I'm not worried about playing on the line of scrimmage at the NFL level. He's not the fastest guy in the world. He's not the one who's going to be a vertical stretcher for you, but he can play on the line. He can block his ass for you, and he's got great contested catch ability too. So he is that true X receiver that they just do not have on the roster right now. So we're going 2 zone blocking studs in Gray Zabel and Jared Wilson on day 1 and day 2, and then when we get to day 3, we're targeting Pat Bryant there to be that X wide receiver. Any thoughts there, or any thoughts at all before we wrap up here?
There are 2. I'll give you 2. The Seattle one, you know what? It's a guy I would have done on day 3 because I think it's the best place for him to go. I would have completed the trifecta and just gone Willie Lampkin with the day 3 pick there. I think it's perfect. Actually, I'm in all seriousness. I think Clint Kubiak and that offense is exactly the type of place that Willie Lampkin needs to go. I would have just gone to screw it, Zabel, Wilson, Lampkin. I would have gone all 3 there. And then I actually want to go all the way back to your first one with the Chicago Bears. I think that's the one I disagree with the most because I'm just such a fan of Ashton Jeanty getting to Chicago. I think that's where I would start it and then build it the other way from there. Go Jeanty and then D-line, and then if you want to take another depth tight end on day 2 or something like that, that's just I got to be honest. I'm locked in on Ashton Jeanty finding a way to get to the Chicago Bears behind that line.
It's my favorite landing spot for him. Right? I mean, like with the ideal landing spots, I think it's the most fun. And we had a lot of fun watching Ashton Jeanty over the last couple of years, and that only continues with Chicago. Also had a lot of fun reading the chat today. The chat was very lively. They really enjoyed this format. We'll be sure to keep this in our back pocket because you guys seem to really enjoy this one, and we'll make sure that we continue to do that in future draft seasons. I don't know if we're going to do this again before next Thursday because a week from now is the 2025 NFL Draft. We're going to be live for all 3 days of the 2025 NFL Draft. Myself, Dalton, Max Chadwick will be joining us as well, as will the boss man, Chris Collinsworth. We'll be on the desk for night 1, doing a live stream there, recapping and analyzing every single pick as they are in real time. We'll be doing the same thing on day 2 and day 3 as well. So make sure you guys mark your calendars. We would love to see you in the chat for that. It's one of my favorite things that we get to do every single year is all watch the draft together. If you guys don't have a PFF Plus subscription, now is a great time to get one. You can run as many mock drafts as you want. If you have a PFF sub, you can download the PFF draft guide. Basically, all the draft information that we have for you guys is available if you go get that PFF Plus subscription, which you can do over at pff.com. We're going to be wrapping up our thoughts on the 2025 NFL draft with all sorts of mock draft madness, those final mock drafts, those final rankings, those final big boards. So many shows coming at you guys next week. We're very, very excited for it. We will see you guys on Monday to kick off what will be a very exciting draft week. Until then, I'm Trevor Sikkema. That's Dalton Wasserman. Thank you guys so much for watching the PFF NFL show. We'll see you guys next week.